Hey, good morning, y'all. This is Rotten Real Estate Recollections with Crystal Roy. This is episode 2, when I'm going to share with you the time I got a closing attorney fired. I was in the conference room the day after closing, getting ready for probably a property tour with a buyer client, and I got a call from Scott. Scott is the principal and owner of the attorney firm with whom I'd had a closing the day before. And actually earlier, probably a couple of years earlier, Scott had actually personally closed my purchase when I bought a house in South Park. And as a matter of fact, I got such a great deal on it. He offered me several $1,000s at the table to go ahead and sign it over to him because it was a great buy. But anyway, the day before, I had been in a closing. My buyers and I walked in after the sellers had already been seated in the office with the attorney, and we said hello, and the sellers were not friendly. Okay, it's a very usually high anxiety pressure day, and sometimes we don't sell for reasons that are happy. Sometimes they are unhappy reasons. Now, I didn't have any inside information in any of that, but here we are closing. So the closing attorney is someone I'd never worked with before. He would basically just slide the papers over and say, sign here or whatever. But you could feel the tension in the room. It was thick. And as we progressed through the paperwork, nothing in particular that I experienced happened. I don't know what happened before we walked into that room. But at a certain point, Mr. Seller went to grab that walnut conference table with both hands, and it looked like he was going to flip it over. And we were on the other side, my buyers and I. We would have been injured. And I became alarmed, and I was like monitoring. My people were like, oh my gosh. And then the closing attorney seemed like totally detached. Mr. Seller was fuming and furious. Mrs. Seller, I don't remember what her response or what her face looked like, but I started saying peace, peace out loud, peace, peace. And I said, Mr. Attorney, meet me in the hall. I stood up and I went and opened the door, and I looked at him and waited for him to go with me to the hall. He probably felt like the principal's calling him in to the office. So I closed the door. We were standing in the hallway, and the only person out there, no other clients or anything. The receptionist was at the desk, and I said to the attorney, I said, I don't know what happened before I walked in this room with my buyers that has set Mr. Seller off, but he almost flipped that walnut conference table over on top of us, which was not his intention. He'd had it. He was blowing his top. So I said, I don't know what happened before we walked into this room, but here's what's going to happen when we walk back in. You are going to finish this paperwork. You're only going to say the exact words necessary. We're going to sign. The other party's going to sign, and then we're going to say congratulations to the seller. We're going to let the sellers walk out, and we are going to wait in this office for 30 minutes to make sure. I don't know what car they're driving. I don't know where they're parked, but we're not going to move for 30 minutes until they leave the parking lot. And he said, okay. So we walked back in. He did exactly that. He didn't have any kind of attitude in particular, and we got it done. So Scott called and said, what in the world happened? And I explained all of this. And he said, well, I fired him. And he went on to explain, I have known him since college. We went to college together. We started this firm together. We've worked together for a long time. And he's going through a divorce, and that's why he behaved this way. And I fired him. And I said, Scott, look, if you've been a longtime friend of this guy, I totally get that, people go through things. But firing him, is that really, what you needed to do? Could you maybe give him some time off? And he said, no, I cannot risk the reputation of my law firm. And I said, 100%, I get it. I'm with you 100%. But here's the thing. That's a really rotten real estate recollection. My buyer should have had a very happy, enjoyable process of purchasing this home, but it was overlaid with someone else in the room who brought his emotional immaturity and lack of being able to manage his own emotions, to regulate himself. He brought his personal business into this space. And this is why he's getting a divorce, okay? Because he can't manage his own emotions. If you cannot regulate your emotions, you're not going to be able to, resolve conflict. You're not going to be able to reconnect after conflict. That's a message for a different day. But this closing attorney lost his job because he could not manage himself, which caused Mr. and Mrs. Seller to kind of jump on board that train, which put my side of the table, which was myself and my buyers, in potential danger because Mr. Seller was going to flip that table. Just by the grace of God, he did not. So realtors solve problems you guys never know existed. We're there to be the voice of reason, the second pair of eyes and ears, to manage. I manage my emotions pretty well, but also sometimes I have got to manage the room, and I've grown really good at that. But just wanted to share some of the things that y'all don't see behind the scenes with what should have been a very enjoyable time for my buyers to go in and buy. This was purchasing their very first home. But they did live there for about 14 years before they upgraded and moved to a bigger, beautiful home, more beautiful home, and really enjoyed living there. But this was the start. But I said, hey, don't let this be any part of your story. We're going to flush this and we're going to move on. But you guys have a great day. It's Crystal Roy with the Safari Group, solving problems you didn't know existed and sharing some, really rotten real estate recollections. Have a good one, guys. Bye-bye.